Hi, my name is Julianne, and for most of my life, I've used productivity hacks and tips as a way to mask and manage my anxiety. This means that when I couldn't keep up with Inbox Zero or other systems, my anxiety would get super high, and I'd be really sure that I was a failure and that everyone could see that I was a fraud. There's a nice good dash of imposter syndrome in there as well. And then I would just actually fall more behind on those things because I was trying to hold myself to a standard. And then when I didn't meet that standard, I thought, oh, well, it's just the fact that I didn't meet that standard and that's why I'm anxious. It's not the other way around that I'm anxious and so I'm avoiding, something in my inbox. And I always thought that was because I was lazy, but I've learned that that's actually probably because I'm overwhelmed and anxious. And on the flip side of that, I would often work late and lay awake at night thinking about all the things I hadn't done that day because I was scared that if I didn't put in more effort than was required and get absolutely everything done before the deadline, that I would lose my job. And I do want to be clear that that is the reality for some people. For me, that was not the reality. Actually, the place where I worked, there was a lot of grace for things like that. But in my mind, there was not. And so I definitely pushed myself really hard and actually burned myself out because the anxiety was telling me that I needed to run faster and do more. And actually, this is part of what inspired me to start this Where the Hours channel, is that I realized that all of these productivity methods and tips and tricks that I was trying to use to manage my anxiety weren't working. And I'm guessing that if you're stumbling across a video like this on the internet, welcome, by the way, that's happened to you too. And you're probably, even if you haven't thought about it, trying to fix yourself in some way with these productivity tips and tricks. And I'm not here to knock any systems. If you have found something that works for you, that is awesome. I am so happy for you. But speaking as someone with anxiety, a lot of productivity hacks and tips and tricks aren't actually built for a brain that runs on anxiety. And a lot of times the things that they tell us to do actually make it worse. And so in this video, we're going to talk about what some of those things are. And I'm speaking solely from personal experience here. It is my hope and prayer to someday be able to do a follow-up to this video where I've actually done some research on this. But just speaking from personal experience here, I was able to come up with a lot of things that actually trigger my anxiety rather than helping it when it comes to getting things done and being productive. And then I did also want to share the few things that I found so far that actually help. So let's get into it. Okay, so the first system I want to talk about is time blocking. This is really famous. You can, if you look up time blocking, there's a lot of people, famous people who use it. Elon Musk uses it. Cal Newport uses it. It's basically this method where you block out time on your calendar for all of the things that you need to do. Basically, you make appointments either with other people or with yourself for those things. And for me, at least, this is the environment of an anxiety rave, okay? It gets so high when I see that maxed out calendar and when things inevitably go over the time that they're supposed to take, because they do. Meetings always go over, working on a project always goes over. Even if you're just telling yourself you need to make progress, it goes over. You take time to catch up on some email or do something. And then that takes a block of time out of something that you're supposed to be doing. And honestly, when things don't go as planned and I am using the time blocking method, I just can see my whole life spinning out of control before my very eyes. And I get to the end of the day and I feel like I haven't done anything, even if I've been able to get a few things done. It's really hard for my anxiety not to just go full throttle when I have some exact thing that I'm supposed to be doing at an exact time. And, life happens and you can't always do those things. The second advice that is not helpful when you have anxiety, especially related to getting things done, is any method that requires you to write down only 3 things or only 1 thing, or I think there's even some that are only 5 things for the day that you have to get done. This comes with a caveat because I do actually feel for my anxiety, it helps me to know what the bare minimum is that I want to do that day in order to declare it a success. but I'm specifically talking about systems where they tell you to only write one thing down and not write anything else down, or only write 3 things or whatever. My brain, if there is a task that pops into it that I need to do, and I don't have some place to put that, to keep track of it, my brain will just bring it up over and over and over again, because it's convinced that if I forget, something terrible is going to happen, right? Like, we're working on this in therapy, I'm working on this in life. But a lot of times I am so afraid that I'm going to forget something that if I'm not able to make a bit of a list, a brain dump or a to-do list or whatever you want to call it, if I don't have some place where I can store that is not my head, it drives me crazy. But honestly, this is like one of the recurring themes with some of these that you'll see later. And it's that like anxiety gives you this tension between the need to simplify so that you don't get overstressed, but then also the need to have everything where you know where it is, because otherwise like that also causes anxiety. So like it's no insults to anyone who has created productivity systems, right? Like the mind on anxiety is a crazy thing. But yeah, like methods where people are like, oh, I just write down the 3 things that I need to do that day and I do those things. I'm like, how do you do that? How do you do the other things that you need to do that aren't like big enough deals to make it to that list, but like also still need to be done? Like how? The third productivity thing that isn't super helpful with anxiety is most methods involving timers. Now, this could be a me thing, but usually if the method involves a timer, specifically a very short timer or an alarm going off, this is actually counterproductive for me. I spend my whole time stressing about how much time is left instead of actually focusing on the thing I'm supposed to be doing. Like I'm just worried about not reaching the deadline. And so then I actually don't do my best work. And like you can forget about trying to get focused or be in a flow state, because that is not going to happen when I know that there is a timer that is about to go off in 10 minutes or 15 minutes or 5 seconds. And there are certainly exceptions to this. Sometimes, setting a 5-minute or 15-minute timer and telling myself I only have to do a task that I'm really dreading for that amount of time has actually helped me get over anxiety. But I use those sparingly because, again, like timers just kind of make me go, ah! Number 4 is the standard productivity advice to eat the frog. And there are like different ways that people say this, but basically eating the frog means like if your job is to eat the frog, you just do that first thing, you get it over with. Like whatever nasty, dreadful thing that you have to do that day, that's the first thing you do. And while I can appreciate this advice, and I have been able to do it at different times in my life, because normally the most important thing on my list is the most scary too. And sometimes I have to be able to work with myself and really get myself ready to do that thing. And if I spend hours talking myself into doing something that is important, because sometimes that's just how it has to go when you have anxiety, then I miss out on those hours where I could have been doing things that, they're not as important. They are distractions, or they are like me procrastinating on the most important thing. But at least I got something done in that time instead of sitting there and trying to do the thing that is stressing me out and getting more and more stressed and feeling more and more shame over the fact that I can't do it. So for me, like this is not good advice when I have anxiety. Sometimes, if the thing that I need to do doesn't stress me out, fine, great. But if it's causing me anxiety, a lot of times I need to give myself permission to not have that be the first thing that I do that day, because otherwise I won't get anything else. And I'll just feel horrible about myself. And honestly, I may not even get that thing done if I make myself feel horrible enough. 5 is SMART goal setting. Now, SMART is a framework that a lot of methods use and a lot of businesses use if you're part of the corporate world. And SMART is an acronym. It stands for specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. So basically, because I have anxiety, I forget that middle one, attainable. And so I get really specific. I have like ways that I know that the task will be done. I set a deadline, and I have a really good imagination, because like, I think that this is something that most of us with anxiety share, is that we have really good imaginations, and that can be a gift. And when it's in the hands of an anxious and worried brain, it can also be a really bad thing. And so I can imagine myself doing anything in any amount of time. Like, I am superhuman at times, just like ask me, right? Not actually, I don't ever have like superhuman capabilities, but a lot of times when I'm setting goals, I think, oh, well, this is not a big deal. This is only going to take 15 minutes. And then it takes, an hour or 5 hours, depending on, my level of familiarity with the task and how much time I actually spend thinking about it. And so while setting SMART goals may not actually be bad if you have anxiety, I do feel like for a lot of us, having that deadline, especially if we set it too soon, and the fact that it is specific and measurable and we're not able to kind of change the finish line as we go, can be very toxic for our brains, very worry inducing. So when setting SMART goals, if you have to do this for work or if the method that you use uses these, I don't think that being specific is necessarily a problem. And I don't even think that it being measurable or time bound is necessarily a problem, as long as you are able to give yourself more time than you think you need. And I think that's really the key here, is that if you don't have the time to get yourself together when you're feeling anxious about a step in the process, the SMART goals really aren't going to work for you. They're actually going to make you feel more like a failure, because you know exactly in what ways you were failing or falling short of your goals. At least that's been my experience. So you can give your thoughts in the comments if you have had a different experience. I would love to hear about that, because maybe I'm just doing it wrong. But for me, I feel like I just kind of handle SMART goals very warily. I know that there is power in knowing exactly what you're going for, but I also know that I can get really, really carried away with those. And then I just feel worse about myself and my anxiety spikes, because I know exactly what I have to do, and I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to do it. Number 6 is apps. I'm not actually saying that productivity apps in general are bad if you have anxiety. I think that some of them could actually be helpful. But for me personally, because I have anxiety, going on my phone often leads to doom scrolling. And so just in general, when I see a notification come up from an app or whatever, that's not actually a helpful thing for me if I don't have proper boundaries or discipline within myself in place over my social media consumption at that time. So, not knocking any specific apps. I haven't actually used that many of them because that is such a problem for me, but just kind of having something on my phone where I could also be doing doom scrolling or wasting time that then makes me more anxious about the time I've wasted. Not a good mix. Number 7, I'm calling this plain to-do list. So this is not really a productivity method that most people recommend, but it's one that a lot of us end up using just because it takes the least amount of time and effort. And it's just where you put everything you need to do on one big list and you kind of knock it off systematically. I know I said earlier that only saying one thing or only saying 3 things is pretty anxiety inducing. I need someplace to write all my things, and I do. But if that's where I stop, that is also stressful. It's really overwhelming because my brain is telling me that every single thing on that list is important, when actually they're not all important. And even if they were all important, they're not all equally important. And in reality, most of the time, some of the things are important. Some of them are just nice to have, and some of them don't actually need to be done at all. And I'm just putting extra pressure on myself because I have a lot of fears and anxieties. And so, plain to-do lists are also not really great if you have anxiety. Number 8 is multitasking. Again, I don't think that actually a lot of people in the productivity space necessarily recommend multitasking, although I do think that if you look closer at a lot of the hacks and tips and tricks, there's a lot of multitasking being recommended going on. But I do think that the way that a lot of us function in order to get things done and meet deadlines and things like that, is that we do end up multitasking. And listen, no disrespect to you if you are able to be on a conference call and composing and answering an email at the same time. Honestly, great for you. Love that for you. For me, it makes my brain buzz. It makes it feel like mush because the whole time I'm trying to multitask, I'm worried that I'm not doing a good job on either thing. Like, for example, I'm worried that I'm not listening well on the conference call and I'm going to miss something that's really important. And then, my performance is going to go downhill and I'm just going to get fired or, whatever the thing is that I'm worried about. And I'm also worried about that I'm not reading the email properly or, my spelling and my grammar isn't going to make sense. So I'm just going to send something that's totally incoherent because I'm actually trying to pay attention to the call and not write the email. So, that takes a lot of energy, and that actually is worse for me than if I just wait till the conference call is over and write the email in most cases. So any method that is like involving multitasking or any like situation where multitasking is kind of expected, like I feel like conference calls and emails is kind of expected sometimes in some, places of work, it just really doesn't work super well for me. And I don't even actually know if that's because I struggle with anxiety or if that's just like how some human brains work, but I think it's probably related to the anxiety. You can let me know what you think. And then the final one is having no plan. So it may seem like with all the like stuff that I have said about different productivity systems that I think that the best thing for anxious people is to just go with the flow and do things. While that may be the case for some people, I'm not going to speak to everyone's experience. That is not the case for me. And my guess is that it's probably not actually the case for most people with anxiety. And here's why. Anxiety thrives when there is uncertainty. And there's a lot of uncertainty in just the regular course of life, which is not something that we can necessarily solve. But when there are cases where you can actually eliminate some of that uncertainty for yourself, provide some structure, give yourself some direction, I think that it is a good idea to have some of that. Like obviously there are ways that you can overstructure and use that structure that is not helpful when you have anxiety. But speaking from personal experience, when I don't have a plan, my anxiety just goes through the roof because instead of having a system for what I need to do and when I want to do it, and knowing that like, okay, at some point I'm going to get this thing done because I've written it down and I've thought about when I'm going to do it. I just have to hold all of those things in my head and they all pop up at random times. And it's my brain's job not to forget any of them so that they all get done. And my brain takes that job very seriously and will keep me up at night and just like whatever. Like the anxiety just goes really crazy when there's no plan in place, when there's no way to keep track of what I need to do. And so I would say when you have anxiety, having no plan and just doing things as they come along is actually not a good system either. Okay, so now that we have completely trashed like the entire productivity industry, just gone out the window, bye. Let's talk about some of the things that have worked for me so far. And this is something that I'm still trying to learn. And obviously, as I think and learn more about like holistic productivity and really like taking into account our whole selves and our whole life when we are thinking about how we want to spend our time, I know that I'm gonna find out more things, and you know that I will share those with you on this channel. So make sure that you like this video and subscribe. But here's what I found that's worked so far, and so I'm gonna share those things. Okay, the first thing that helps is having a plan with built-in flexibility. So for me and my anxious brain, having a plan is good. Clinging to it too rigidly is not. The second thing that helps is remembering that I'm a human, not a robot, and giving myself grace when I make mistakes or I don't perform the way that I think I should be able to perform. Number 3 is giving myself permission not to finish every task every day. This has been a very tough one for me. I do like a beautifully, totally crossed off to-do list. But sometimes there's too much to be done and it all is on the list. And even if I organize and prioritize, I just need to give myself permission to not do all of it in one day, which is related to number 4, which is cutting goals in half, whether that is the number of things I need to do in a day or just setting a goal and then thinking, okay, that is too much. I need to cut it in half. That has really helped as well. And that's a tip from Finish by Jon Acuff, which I will link to in the description. That might actually be a good book to talk about on this channel. I'm going to have to revisit it and see. Number 5, the 5th thing that helps is knowing what my priorities are so that I can let non-essential things slide. Because I need to be able to let go of some things and not just let my anxiety run the show, but I also don't want my life to fall apart. And then the final thing that I found that helps is making sure that I pay attention to the things that often make me feel anxious, and making sure that when I am making a plan for my week or my day or whatever, that I also have a plan to address those things. So like, for example, for me, this is like so stereotypical. I don't know. So boring. I'm boring. I'm sorry. But for me, having a messy house, there are days where I just wake up and that makes me feel anxious. It makes me feel uncentered and just really terrible about myself. And so this week I was noticing that our bedroom is getting a little messy. It's getting a little cluttered. There's maybe some things that we haven't picked up or put away that we should have. And it's been like that for a couple of weeks. And, there's been different things going on. I haven't been worried about it, but I noticed it last week, toward the end of the week. And so when I was planning my week this week, I said, okay, that I could feel the anxiety starting when I look at the bedroom or I think about the bedroom. And so I need to make sure that I have a plan for when I'm going to take care of that. And so I made sure that I put that in my plan so that the anxiety doesn't spike and just like overrun my entire plan for the week because I'm like, no, I need to take care of this house. It's a mess right now. Instead, I'm able to address the specific thing that is bothering me. And so I just, I guess the thing that helps here is paying attention to myself and to what normally triggers that anxiety and the stress so that I can be a little bit more proactive about taking care of those things so that it doesn't get as bad inside my head. Okay, I hope that helped. Obviously, I think this is probably a part 1. I don't know when I'm going to do the next part of this, but I'd love to kind of delve into the science or research or just kind of see what other people have to say about this. And so I will keep you updated via videos on this channel. And I can't wait to see you next week.